Thank you so much, Ruma. Really appreciate that introduction and also very much appreciate the chance to speak to you all. So thank you to Soon Safer Happier. Um, I've worked very closely with Maria, and some of the insights that you'll be seeing in this has been co-designed with the work from her and her team as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share that. Also, just want to acknowledge I've got Ian Donaldson in this meeting, who's our incredible Scrum Master, who's had huge input to a lot of this work as well. So big shout out to you, Ian. Thank you very much, mate. Last thing is probably just to say my official title is National Manager for Customer Experience and Strategy, and definitely digital innovation and leading change and transformation is part of that role, big part at this point. So thank you very much, Rima, for that lovely introduction again. I might just share my slides if that's okay and get into it. Do feel free to put any questions in the chat and emojis. Obviously, I'll answer anything I can, but there is a Q&A session at the end as well, which will be quite a big part of it because I don't think the presentation will go more than sort of 35 minutes. Although I do like to talk, so it's a risk. So maybe, obviously I've got a group of people that really like Agile, and I probably don't have to sell the benefit of Agile to you, but to be honest with you, before I get into talking about our journey, the first thing I like to do is start with where we began and where we are now and tell that story, because I think it's really impactful to understand the iterative process that we've had to focus on in terms of breaking traditional governance foundations such as traffic light reports, milestone check-ins that we've seen from waterfall slides that a lot of our executives and leadership team are really used to and feel probably quite safe in that area. And I'll kind of go into that in a lot more detail on this. And because I wanted to break down the fact that these are good things. Governance is a wonderful thing. Agile is a wonderful thing. Milestone check-ins are a wonderful thing. Cost justification is a wonderful thing. And it's definitely coexists with Agile. But I think sometimes when we first went on this journey, there wasn't an understanding from me or myself that that was actually one of the parts that was missing when we first embarked on that journey. So going into that journey, and I'll be talking to how we sort of landed there and how we've addressed that over time. So hopefully you'll learn what we learned much faster than we did. Going into our journey, we started in 2017 at a value stream level. Now, what I mean is I represent fundraising as there, and we have a squad focused on supporter retention squad is what they're called. We really focus very heavily on retention and optimization of customer experience, digital interactions, and conversion rates. Before we had a value stream Agile team, Agile sat in IT and it was limited to tech-led delivery. Now, for those of you that know that traditional model, what it means is you essentially go to your IT team with a problem and they come to you with a solution. We evolved it into cross-functional squads with business SMEs and IT developers working together with traditional ceremonies such as daily stand-ups, showcases, retrospectives, etc. And that enabled us to have iterative delivery, much faster feedback, and most importantly, shared accountability. We really broke down that silo of IT didn't deliver what we wanted. It was we didn't explain to the person within our squad and our team what we wanted to achieve. So where we landed, and we embedded Agile into enablement teams. So we took project teams, we took a number of teams that were working on sort of iterative projects and iterative design, and we took IT developers and BAs and merged them together and basically turned them into squads or enablement teams. And it led to business and IT working side by side on real supporter needs. So we were really close to supporters. We were taking qualitative and quantitative data and bringing that into our design process and co-designing in some cases with our supporters directly. It worked incredibly well, and I'll talk to that in the next slide. But basically what we saw is team hours were saved or repurposed because the decision-making process between an SME and an IT developer or BA was so fast that what used to take a week or 2 weeks to actually get clarity on what we're trying to achieve, they could get in a 15-minute to a half-hour meeting. And they had that access to each other all throughout the day, every day. So we saw huge savings in team hours of waiting for answers and waiting for decisions, which led to reduced operational waste. And we really focused as a team on continuous improvement. Now, the main reason for this, I don't know about you, but within our sector, there isn't a lot of money to go around, and continuous improvement is one way to continually optimize and basically make really careful, considered, and tested solutions that you then scale for revenue uplift or engagement uplift. So that was the main thing we wanted to focus on when we first went into this. And that's changed over time a little bit as we got better and better at that. What we saw is quite a large revenue uplift through retention. So we had much easier experiences with our supporters, and we had more engaging customer experience as well. We saw engagement rates in some of our digital interactions go from 10% up to 40%, for example, within the first few years of moving to this. The other thing is we had better retention. And retention for us means we have a number of amazing sponsors and regular donors who basically donate on a monthly basis, and we were retaining them at a higher rate because we're engaging with them more effectively and also offering them information in a much faster and better manner, in a way that they wanted to actually work with us. So the reason for moving to Agile, and this was the situation we were in before we did this, for those of you that have worked in waterfall governance before, it is a really safe way to work. It's a very stage-gated way to work, and it has a lot of benefits to it. But what we saw was traditional waterfall governance was slowing down delivery, and it really offered limited flexibility in terms of access to decision makers. So iterations were delayed due to long planning cycles and sequential approvals. So we were waiting 2 weeks for project decisions. It could be up to a month. And in some cases, if there was board involvement, it could be 3 months before we could potentially change a project's trajectory in order to meet new information that we'd acquired. As I say, I'm sure that this is probably something you've experienced yourself, but this was our journey of why we said maybe Agile's better for us. Our solutions were often misaligned with needs, and that was because our delivery teams, our IT teams, were disconnected from the work streams and the actual teams that were trying to deliver and knew the customers that they were trying to deliver for. What this resulted in is solutions that missed the mark and required multiple costly reworks. The other thing is we had a centralized and bottlenecked backlog. This later became actually a benefit for us when we went to Agile, but I'll mention that sort of in the further slide. But the backlog was owned by IT with limited visibility across the organization, except for what was currently being worked on or planned to be worked on in the next sprint. And what that meant was there was projects that we had that we felt were very valuable, and we didn't really know when they were going to get delivered. We couldn't plan for that change, and we couldn't actually start to consult with people that we need to consult with. So it was a big change process that was limited to, we don't really know when this is going to get worked on. And that was one of the problems of the bottleneck that we had created. The other thing is we tried to fix that with more frequent consultation meetings. So we moved from fortnightly to weekly consultation meetings, but still this decision-making process was still too slow, even at that weekly level. The other thing I want to talk to is we did a market research at the time. We said, okay, well, what are the benefits of moving away from waterfall to Agile? And I say that this is based on 2017 data because I based this on a paper that we found at the time. The data that we had was waterfall project completion rates were around 48%. I did a quick Google search before this, and it seems to still be around that 45% mark. We found that 65 to 80% of IT projects failed to meet objectives, timelines, or budgets. So one of those three pillars was often slipping within waterfall. And Agile projects were saying that they had a 28% higher success rate than non-Agile ones at the time. So based on that, we said, well, let's embark on this endeavor and really give this a good try. The results year one were phenomenal. And I say that with no arrogance at all. The data that came out was quite surprising for everyone. We jumped from around 85% customer satisfaction on any inquiries and went to 93%. We had a 91.3% retention rate, and that was a huge lift. And I'm not sure what the retention rates are for your continuous giving products in your industries, but for our industry, that's very, very high. And we're really proud of that because obviously that means it's less spending on acquisition and, of course, more engaged owners as well. Our rejection rates dropped significantly for recurring giving, and we averaged an additional $600,000 annually through optimizations. Now, I say optimizations because that is literally just tweaking to existing processes, and particularly digital processes. That wasn't including new products or anything like that. It was literally just looking at what are we doing right now, how can we do it better, and using that continuous improvement and iteration model to drive that revenue lift. We also had, we shifted multiple engagements to digital, which, as you know, reduces costs. And we found the other side is it massively boosted conversions. Our customers were quite hungry to actually start to have engagements digitally where they had the choice to. Some people still love sending letters and picking up a phone call or doing whatever they want to do to interact with us. But what we found is offering these, another option, our uplift in overall conversion rates for campaigns and also for engagement and customer satisfaction just shot up massively. And our costs went down, which was great. This is one campaign I wanted to highlight. We had a number of campaigns when I presented this at another conference, I think in 2019. But this was one of the things that I put up, and it sort of said, it showed that from a digital interaction perspective, this is people actually updating their details so that if they had rejected or if their credit card provider or bank provider had said this bank account has changed, this is people actually updating those details. And as you can see, from a digital interaction perspective, we went from 16% to 36% in the first year that we launched Agile. And this for us was saying, okay, we've got this right. Now, I do want to take a moment to pause and say, we were really, really lucky because we had this amazing backlog of work that had come from brilliant ideas from people for probably over 3 years, just sitting with IT going, these are all great ideas. We don't have the capacity to work on them, because iterating in that fashion, in the way that it was being delivered, they were probably delivering, I'd say, 2 or 3 projects per month for our value stream. I stress for our value stream because they had multiple other teams that they were working on. So we were really lucky. We had this great backlog of work and we were able to pick and choose what's the most valuable, what do we think is going to work the best, and we got to test all these great ideas that were not quite fully formed, but were these nuggets of absolute gold. And so that is why that first year we had such a great uplift. So the results of 2 years, for the first 2 years, we delivered 36 major deliverables in 24 months, or 1.5 initiative deliveries per month was our average run rate. And we obviously started off much slower. I think our first actual deliverable took almost 3 months. And then after that, it just got faster and faster and faster in that 24-month period as we as a team started to work and function better. Now, here's a bit where we kind of pause and went, this is going so great. We love this. Everyone should love this. But for some reason, there was still questions going, is this really working? We're going, well, we can see the data, it's working. We can see retention going up. But there's questions such as, is the work that you're doing actually impacting on that retention rate? Is it actually making sure that that's going up? And are we sure that that's the reason all of these things are going up? And it was a great question, because what it highlighted to me is I had all this data, I had all these metrics, but I didn't actually have, and to quote Soon Saver Happier, that golden thread back to strategy to say that this piece of work we're working on is directly impacting on this. And so I created what I call the problem statements for Agile. And this is just from my perspective, this isn't Agile in general, this is just what I was finding with it. The first thing is the lack of milestone checkpoints weakens governance visibility. I don't believe it weakens governance. I think actually decentralizing it down to a team creates more ownership and actually they govern themselves better. But the visibility suffers as a result of that push down of empowerment. As a result, leadership feels disconnected from day-to-day delivery. They don't really necessarily know what's happening because they don't need to, but they don't have those milestone sort of transparency that they're used to seeing in a traditional waterfall project sense. Transparency can suffer without direct involvement from your leadership. So you could have issues basically with buy-in, and trust replaces traditional control in Agile, which I love, but it's not always comfortable for people that are used to traditional methodologies of project management. Empowerment at lower levels may reduce strategic alignment. It was one of the things that we were concerned about. And one of the things that, to be honest with you, at the time, I was like, I'm not sure if that's a true statement or a false statement. I had to really think about how to tackle that. Rapid delivery cycles make it hard to assess long-term impact was another issue. Difficult to track progress across multiple Agile teams. And we have multiple teams that work together within Agile. If we rely on cybersecurity, for example, we'll have to work with them for a particular requirement. And that was hard to actually track and break down. And the other thing is board reporting struggles to reflect on the iterative progress. They can see that our metrics were good, but they weren't really understanding whether the work that the squads were doing was actually the reason behind those metrics or whether it was something else. So as I mentioned, what we needed to do is step back and go, okay, well, what's the golden thread back to strategy, and how can we visualize this so that our leaders can make good decisions? And again, when the leaders came and said, I'm not sure if we have enough information to make a decision, that's exciting to me, because we want to make sure that they're asking hard questions. We want to give them information so they can actually say, are you sure you're investing in the right place? Are you sure that that team shouldn't shift their focus, or that squad shouldn't shift their focus to that? Because I think there's due diligence within a board and within an exec team that they should be able to ask those questions, and I should be able to provide information to them so they can ask those questions really well and really well informed. So we kind of went, okay, well, what's step one for the solution? And it was really basic. I kind of literally took us probably a couple of weeks to a month to get this up and running. And again, call you out, Ian, because you helped a lot with this. And we said, okay, well, let's create reporting structure through DevOps tags. So what we did is we kind of went, okay, well, what do we want to know? And the first thing we said was, we want to know what people are working on. That's pretty basic. So what are the categories for what people are working on? And we kind of said, well, we need to have a balanced perspective of what people should be working on, so that we can actually forecast out how many points and how many pieces of work we can start to actually get done within any month or within any quarter. And what we came up with is kind of guidelines around the percentage of time that squad should be working on different large sort of tag guidelines. So we said BAU was about 30%, and that's break fix, organizational support, minor enhancements, platform support. And the way we view that work is that's work that just has to happen. It keeps the lights on. It's really important. You can't not do it. It's things like security patches and upgrades to your SaaS software and your CRM. It's work that just absolutely has to happen. Then you've got initiatives. This is the work that falls into the squad for long-term planned work under approved categories. And initiatives for us, I guess, is, you can call them sort of epics or projects or whatever you want to do, but it's that work that's been given to us by the wider fundraising team and sometimes from other teams in the organization, and has been prioritized that that's what we should be working on that quarter. Innovation was about 10%, and for us, what innovation was is really keeping up to date with what's out there and leveraging platforms as much as possible. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can probably give anyone right now is technology keeps getting cheaper. SaaS technology gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And we found that by having this 10% of innovation, we're able to go, we've got this current solution. If we go to this solution, it's a new one. Is it cheaper? Does it have more? Does it have a better infrastructure? Does it have other things that we can leverage that could also help us in other ways? And we kept finding that there was a number of tech solutions that were actually better than the ones we're using, that if we didn't have that space for our team and our developers and also our SMEs to look into, we wouldn't have actually found. The other piece of this was giving the team absolute freedom to fail. Then we, of course, we had 5% for retrospectives because we just wanted to get faster and faster at iterating and delivering value for our team and for our organization. So the solution step one, this is an actual pie chart, I think, from one quarter. So please don't take a screenshot. But basically, this was our pie chart visuals, and you can see the breakdown there of BAU, initiative, innovation, retro. And this was really great when I first presented this to my executive and to the executive team, because we could actually say, this is what the squad's working on, and we could say, this is an acceptable amount of BAU, and if it was up one quarter, or like massively, I think one quarter we had 50% because it was a big patch upgrade, we kind of went, initiatives are going to suffer because of this work. And we're able to actually have those larger conversations around what we're going to do in the following quarter to try and address where the work distribution had been. But it was still a little bit reactive. The other thing is, if you double clicked on any of those, it would give you basically a pie chart like that of what the teams are working on. Now, this was really useful because it started to highlight what big pieces of work the team was working on, but the problem still existed that when we gave this to any executive or board or anyone at that sort of level, they were going, I don't really know what PayPal really means, except it's a platform. And that was actually an optimization piece there. I don't really know what FOTIT is. I don't really understand what EX is. These are big terminologies that realistically only the squad knew the detail around what exactly was being delivered under that portfolio. So we kind of went, okay, it's a good start, but it's not the solution we need. So the second solution, and this is where Maria and the team entered to help us, was we worked on a driver tree. And a driver tree is essentially saying you start with that organizational goal and flow through all the way down to that user story level and make sure every piece of work is connected. Which was a significant amount of work. We took a moment in time perspective and said, okay, let's have a look at what we have currently and map these to each level. And I'll go through the levels. We had organizational goal. These aren't real examples. So these are just examples I came up with. So grow fundraising sustainably. Then you had the function level objective, which is generate income in line with targets, for example. Then we had our OKRs, which is that second layer. So enhance use of digital for acquisition is an example of what it could be. Then your epics are your projects, so launch new digital product. Initiative is your fourth layer, design and automate welcome journey for new product as an example. And then your user story, so implement second email within the welcome journey automation for that new product. So we really wanted to get to that level of detail to understand every piece of work that's being worked on links back up to a strategic goal. The way it looks like is basically this, and this is what we currently use. So you've got your org level goal, and we actually mapped out how many we had. So we had one of those. We had function level goal, it was 2. We had a function second layer, which was 4, and that's kind of your OKRs. Your function third layer is your kind of projects or epics or initiatives, whatever you want to call them. And that was around 15. Then we went into that sort of initiative level, which was 51. And then your activities, which is your user stories, we had 166. And we kind of went, well, that seems about right for when you look at the breakdown. And it was great because we could actually see and map back all the way from user story straight back to an OKR, to an epic, to anything we wanted, and go, well, actually, we're working on this, which leads back to the strategic objective. We could present that at any time in any showcase. So what it provided for us was it had a full line of sight. So all work that the squad was working on is now traceable from user stories to epics, OKRs, and ultimately organizational goals. It's strategic alignment and action. So showcases, we started to make sure that each showcase actually had, before we talked about anything we'd worked on or highlighted something we're particularly proud of, it started showcasing with that driver tree of what the work was and what it related to. And so it started to have a conversation that this work is related to that strategic objective. We had visible value creation. So value was assigned at the epic and OKR levels once solutions are delivered. So it wasn't just this conglomerate of the squad has delivered this, it's the squad has delivered this for that strategic objective. So we could have better conversations about what we were working on and how it layered up. Then we had really transparent contributions. So each initiative's linked to strategic outcomes was completely visible, enable clearing prioritization and alignment. And we had shared understanding across levels. So squads and leadership now had a shared view of how work can contribute to broader goals. Probably one of the, I think I do cover it a bit later, but one of the greatest things that came out of this was for us to actually use this for prioritization. It really meant that when we looked at what the team was working on, we kind of went, we haven't really worked too much on that. Maybe we should start to focus on that. And we'd have a look at the backlog and say, do we actually have enough in here that's going to impact on this particular OKR or epic or strategic goal to have an impact there? And if we didn't, then we could go out to teams and go, where are you falling over? Where do you think you can optimize and enhance? What do you want us to test? And have those proactive conversations to make sure that a particular strategic area was not being undervalued or under-resourced. But wait, there's still, as many of you know, when you get more data, the next thing you want is more data, because we're like, oh, hold on. We had all the work mapped to the driver tree. We had full visibility from user stories through to organizational goals, but this clarity revealed a key gap for us. And that was, we as a squad were only tracking lag indicators when assessing progress against strategic objectives. So we're only looking at those big top line sort of retention rate or acquisition numbers or cancellation numbers. We weren't really going into the details around, well, what segments are canceling or what particular activity is conversion dropped on. And as a result, we introduced lead indicators to give earlier signals of progress and risk to the whole process. And these lead indicators now feed into a traffic light system, which I share with my exec quarterly, helping us to better prioritize work and proactively manage delivery against strategy. The way that kind of looks, well, actually, I'll take you through the process first of how we got there. It was a really quick process. It was quite fun, to be honest. We kind of divided metrics into high levels, so longer lag time and closer to real-time categories. And we wanted to focus the team on higher tiers towards real-time data. So that was the main thing we wanted. We said, we kind of know what the lag indicators are, but what's the indicators pushing into those that are kind of a sign that something's going to go wrong in a month or two or a year. We conducted 2 workshops with key customer experience and support retention squad team members to brainstorm the most impactful metrics for shaping that sort of tier 2 strategy. And by tier 2, I mean that OKR level strategy. We mapped all data point ideas to a driver tree, just in Miro, but you could do it on any board, I guess. And we prioritized the metrics through voting based on their impact on top tier goals. The reason I want to put this slide up is just to say that this was not a long scientific process. We said, let's just get something up and start seeing if it works. And what we found is these are just examples and they're not real, so it's fine to share with you. But what we ended up with was this crazy exhaustive list of indicators that show key objectives at the Epic and OKR level we're on track, or at risk, or really, really off track. And it allowed us to quickly visualize and show at a high level where strategic work was based on real-time data, and make informed decision-making for quarterly and monthly planning for larger scale work. So we put metrics into high, medium, low indicators, and we actually had 62 identified data points when we first sort of wanted to launch this that could inform the status of an OKR and an Epic level goal. 62 was far too many, so we reduced this down. I think it's around 36 now, or 38, around there. And we consolidated that down because we kind of said, well, look, we're an organization, like all organizations, there's a lot of data. We don't need to create more data. What we need to do is use the data we have right now, measure it, and then as we go through that process, we're going to iterate, and we can add more data points into those OKRs and structures. And we're really conscious we didn't want to create more burden or more work on reporting teams. We didn't want to become more administratively burdened. We wanted to basically leverage what we had and what was existing. And these are examples at each level that we've put there. Like OKR, we had sort of revenue and cost revenue ratio. At Epic, you had things like retention and acquisition. At that initiative of fourth layer, you had unsubscribes, conversion rates, donor engagement ratios. At the user story level, you had kind of number of processes, automated, activity adoption, average time to market, et cetera, et cetera. So we moved away from sort of this decentralized way of talking about the work that we're doing and saying that, look at these figures, these are really helpful. And then we had the user stories linking all the way back through that golden thread to where we're getting to. And we actually had data and metrics to say, actually, it's not just that we're not spending time on those, it's that these are probably at risk if we don't do something based on the metrics we had. So we're able to produce a traffic light system at an OKR and Epic visual level. So we could kind of give leaders a format that they were used to and they could understand. And it allowed us to have conversations such as, look, we haven't done much work on this, but we don't need to because all the signs are it's going really well and it's healthy. But this other area, we should probably prioritize resources to for the next quarter in terms of that strategic priority or that OKR. And so it allowed us to have really good, insightful, strategic discussions with leaders and also within our own team. So we had that information internally so I could meet with my product owners and actually say, looking at this, what should we be recommending? We're able to go in really, really well informed about these are the areas we think we should be investing in. And these are the particular items in the backlog that we think will help lift these. So it was a bit of a game changer for us because we're not just looking for reactive, we're not just looking for that link to strategy, we're actually proactively looking at data to inform what's the best way for us to make sure we're not going to meet a strategic objective or priority based on lead indicators that may not actually impact on overall revenue or overall cancellation rates for a few months down the track. So the benefits of a simplified visualization I've kind of covered off a little bit, but I'll give it a little bit more of a sequential approach to it. So the first thing was, obviously, we created clear executive oversight. It's my executive. We could present a project and OKR status in a familiar format, so traffic lights, that really resonated with executives and board members when required. We had a high-level view without micromanagement. So we were displaying key decision-making data without needing to dive into delivery detail, which preserved the autonomy at the squad level. And I'll go a little bit more into that detail. I do believe that if I'm getting asked a question by an executive or a leader or a board member about what I'm presenting, then it means that they're not understanding that the link between what we're doing and the strategic objective that's been given to them. So for me, this was great because I could actually go in and say, here's the direct link, here's the health map of where we're at for the strategic priorities that you've basically said as an organization we need to achieve. And this is what we should focus on as a result of this information. So it became really proactive conversations as opposed to reactive conversations of being asked questions and going away and trying to find answers. There was early risk detection and intervention, so it enabled us to have proactive identification of at-risk initiatives and OKRs, and allowed squads to refocus before issues actually escalated and we started to see those sort of lag indicators start to be an issue. We had data-driven prioritization. I can't stress how much I love this piece. Like, prioritization in Agile is such a huge part of why it's a benefit, in my opinion. And having aggregate delivery data and strategic insights meant that we're actually using data as opposed to just saying, well, this has been sitting there for 6 months, so we should probably start to work on this. We're going, well, actually, we should park that for another 6 months because that links to the strategic priority, and that's going great. We could get an uplift, but we should probably put our focus here where we're seeing there's some at-risk metrics. It bridges agile and governance expectations, so it offers transparency and control to executives' value in a waterfall model, so something that people are traditionally comfortable with looking at, but it maintains that agile responsiveness and in some ways actually speeds it up and reinforces it. And again, it just supports better conversations and decisions. It really creates a shared language for that delivery status. And we saw improving cross-functional alignment between teams as well, because we're able to talk about organizational goals versus fundraising goals and sort of be like, well, this is at risk, so we think this probably needs to come, we need to deliver something to lift that before we focus on an organizational goal. And as a result, we got much faster decisions because the conversations we were going into were much more valid and, to be honest, fruitful for us. So obviously, any of us within Agile do like to do a retrospective or a reflection at the end. So I thought I'd just build this into this. So looking back, we haven't nailed everything yet. This is definitely not a presentation saying we've nailed this because, like I said, we don't have all the metrics we want. We're still testing. This has only really been in play, I think, like 6 or 7 months in terms of that traffic light lead indicators. So it is quite new, and we're still testing if it works. It seems to be working in terms of we're hitting our numbers, etc. We're able to identify what's at risk and what's not at risk. So we've shifted from activity to strategic impact. So work is now really, really clearly linked from user story all the way through to that OKR, all the way through to strategic objectives. We've got visual tools like driver trees and traffic lights, which make strategy visible at every level for any executive or anyone that actually asks. We have Agile with accountability, so squads are empowered to deliver, while leaders can stay informed without micromanagement, which is really important, I think, within the Agile infrastructure. Executive visibility is built into everything we do, so when we start a piece of work, it's linked back to an epic, which is linked back to that strategic objective. So anytime someone starts work on it, it's making sure that it's actually that link is there to begin with. We have smarter decisions sooner, so lead indicators and visual dashboards now support early risk detection and really true prioritization. And strategic objectives are no longer reviewed retrospectively, they're actively guided, and those conversations are proactive now. What's next for us? Because there's always a next iteration, and there always should be. We want to continue refining how we measure and communicate value. Value is incredibly important in terms of making sure that you can show what your team is or what my squad is working on is having a direct impact on those measurements and those values. And by moving away from sort of that reactive data, those lag indicators, to proactive, we're actually able to say, well, look, this actually lifted this particular piece of conversion rate for updating details or for engagement with one of our processes to bring a sponsor and a student emotionally sort of closer together so that they can start to have that alignment and share an experience. But basically just say that we are able to do all these things and show that that had an effect on retention a year away or 3 months away or 6 months away, as opposed to waiting for things to go pear-shaped and then trying to fix it reactively. And we're going to keep evolving governance to support agility, not slow it down. And we're really committed to saying that we want Agile to be more embedded in our organization. We want Agile to be more embedded in fundraising because it does work. We know it works. And we just needed to solve the fact that you have to show comfortably and in a way that people understand what you're working on really relates back to the strategic objectives of the organization and the impact that it's actually having on it. So I'm going to stop there. It's a lot of talking for me. And I hope you've got something out of this. I really do. But I'm just going to open it up for Q&A now and see if there's any questions.